Hello everyone. Welcome back to day 3 of the chess camp. Hope you guys are having a great day. Let me quickly present my screen. Okay. So first thing we'll be doing today is quickly reviewing what we learned yesterday, pretty much. So we'll do a couple of practices similar to sort of what we learned about yesterday. We'll go through a couple of those and then we'll go into the new topic we'll be learning today. So this is white to move. Can anyone tell me what you would play in this position? Anyone? So this is a white to move puzzle.
Move the bishop to c6.
Yep, that is correct. This knight is undefended. It's not defended by any piece in black's territory, so we can simply take this piece. We'll skip past this part. Okay. So this is white to move again. Can anyone tell me what's the best move here?
I think you could like take the queen.
Yes, that is correct. So in this position, there's actually two hanging pieces, the bishop and the queen. But as we know, the queen, it's of a higher value. It's worth 9 points. So that is why we'll be taking the queen. Oh, wait. That was not meant to happen.
Wouldn't it be better to kill the bishop because that will put it in check?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
And then afterwards, I'm pretty sure you can still kill the queen.
Yep, that is correct. Yes, I missed that as well. So this move is actually better first because we check the king here, and then afterwards we can take the queen because attacking the king is of a higher priority. So here after this move, basically here, I'll quickly explain this since this is a bit more difficult, but basically since both of our queens are hanging, instead of just giving our queen away for free, we can actually take this rook first. And the reason why is because since we're going to lose this queen anyways, we can get some material in return for losing the queen. And since it's check, our opponent has to take. And once they take back, then we can take the queen, as you mentioned earlier. And this should be an easy win for white. Okay, a couple more. Okay, this is black to move now. Can anyone suggest the best move?
Maybe the best move would be to capture the queen.
So this is black to move. If it's white's move, then white would take the queen.
Okay,
yes.
then move the black queen away.
Okay, there is actually a better move in this position.
You can the queen, the black queen can eat the soldier.
You can move the bishop to kill the knight, a4.
Yes, that is correct. So bishop takes knight is actually the best move. So queen takes pawn wouldn't be as good. I can't actually make the move, so I'll draw arrows. Queen takes pawn isn't as good because basically this pawn is defended by two pieces, the white queen as well as the pawn. So if you take the pawn, you're taking a piece that's only worth 1 point, and in exchange, white will be able to take our queen, which is worth 9 points. And so 1 point trade for a 9 point trade isn't really good for black. However, this knight here is undefended, so we can simply just take this knight. And we'll just skip past this part. Okay. We'll do two more. Okay.
Okay. Then I think we should take horse. The knight.
Okay. So here, this is similar to the second puzzle that we had. So here we should look at all the captures that we had, and all the captures we have, and all the undefended pieces that we can capture. So here you can see that we actually have 2 undefended pieces that we can capture, or with the knight as well. So I'll ask again, which piece do you think we should capture first?
I think we should
The bishop.
Yes, the bishop is correct because
You-
once, yep,
And you
go
could
ahead.
check the knight, I mean the king.
Yeah, that's why. Because if we take the bishop, then we can check the king. So we have to force black to react. And then
we could earn a queen.
yeah, well here here the pawn is actually defending the queen. However, here, similar to the second puzzle, we can take the queen first because it's still a check. And after they take back, since we have a pawn also attacking this knight, our pawn's worth 1 point, where the knight's worth 3. So we can take with the pawn, and we would continue to win more material. So
Oh,
yeah. So usually we look at checks first, and then afterwards we look at captures. So we'll do one more. White to move.
Queen to e8.
Okay, so queen to e8, that's a interesting choice. The thing with queen to e8, however, is that this rook, it's defending the e8 square, so black could take the queen for free.
The white queen to e2.
Yes, that's correct. So this e2 rook, it's not defended by any piece, so we can move the queen backwards and take the rook. And afterwards, we'll skip that. So yeah. Okay, so that's just a bit of review for what we did yesterday, which is looking at undefended pieces. Okay, so now we'll move on to what we'll be learning today. Let me share my screen again. So pretty much for today, we will be learning, so basically extending off of what we learned yesterday. So yesterday we learned about attacking pieces in general. Today we'll be looking at attacking the king. So attacking the king, that's called a check, basically. And a check, it's really powerful because basically our opponent, they have to react to the move we just played, which is a check. And so there are 3 ways to react to a check. One way is to capture the piece that is giving check. Second way is to block. So basically, let's say, I'll set up an example. So let's say our queen is checking our opponent's king. One way would be to capture this queen. Currently, that is impossible. There's no black piece that can actually capture the queen. Another way is to block the check. So what that means is basically placing a piece or a pawn between sort of the queen and the king in order to block this check. So for example, a move like bishop to d7 would block this check because the queen is no longer attacking the king directly. There's a bishop in the way. And then the third way would be for the king to run away. Currently in this position, that's not possible. The only legal move for the king would be to go here, but the queen is still covering the square. So an example of the king being able to run away is something like this, for example. If we give check, then the king here has this square as well. So the king can go to here if they want to. However, when you're giving check to your opponent or when your opponent is checking your king, most recommended is to not move your king, especially early on in the game, because you want to, with your king, you want to obviously do something called castling, which is getting your king safe. And if you move your king, that removes your castling rights because in order to castle, you can't move your king or your rook. So that's why usually, especially earlier on in the game, it's not good to necessarily move your king if you go into check. It's better to either capture the piece that's checking your king or be able to block the check. So that's usually useful. And then for checks, there are 3 types of checks. So one check is the check I just demonstrated, basically any normal check when you're just simply attacking the king. Another type of check is called a discovered check. Basically, what that implies is you have a piece that can check the king, like for example, right here. And for example, you have, I can quickly set it up. Let me demonstrate. Let's say you have a situation like this. So here, basically this queen can obviously check the king. However, this knight needs to move. So this is an example of a discovered check. Basically, for example, we can take this pawn just to demonstrate. So here, although the knight move itself isn't a check, we're still checking the king because when we move the knight, we enabled the queen to be able to see the king, which is why this is called a discovered check, because in a way, it's kind of like the queen is discovering the king or giving a discovered check. And then the third type of check is a double check. So a double check is basically, it's kind of like a discovered check, but a bit more. It's basically 2 pieces checking the king at the exact same time in one move. So for example, here, we can actually play a discovered check. For example, I can play to knight to d6 or knight takes c7, both are double check. So knight takes c7, it's actually a double check because, as you can see, I move my knight away, allowing my queen to discover the king, which is a check. And simultaneously, my knight is on a square where it's also checking the king, which is why this is a double check, because 2 pieces are checking the king. And the thing that's really good with double check is that pretty much the king, unless very, well, it's really rare, but usually when you're doing a double check, the king has to, well, actually, no, always the king has to move because you can't actually block the check because if you block, for example, if you block with the bishop to prevent the queen check, you notice that the knight is actually still checking the king, which is why the king actually always has to move when it's double check. So that's some information about checks. And that actually leads into the next topic, which I have, which is actually checkmate. So before I get there, do you guys understand check so far? Are there any questions? Okay, if not, then I'll go into checkmate and also the different results in chess. So we'll ignore a loss because a loss, that's not good for chess. That's not good when we're losing. So basically for winning in chess, there's 3 ways to win. Checkmate's the first one, and then there's 2 others which are more based for, well, one of them is more tournament regulation kind of style, and then the third one is basically when your opponent gives up. So the second one is winning on time. That's more for tournament things. In tournaments, there's basically a clock where each side has a certain amount of time, and then if you run out of time, you lose the game as well. That's a bit more technical, so we won't discuss that too much. And then the third way, when your opponent gives up, basically that can happen at any point. If your opponent, for example, thinks your position is too good or you're about to win, then they might give up. But checkmate is the most common one, usually. So what happens in checkmate is basically it's kind of like a check, but there's nothing for black to do pretty much. So in essence, checkmate is when your opponent's king can't run away, we'll say, or escape, so they can't move their king away. They can't capture the piece that's giving check. As well, they can't protect the piece or kind of like block it. So if I go back to the example I gave earlier, so this would just be a simple check, but to illustrate checkmate, basically, it would imply that this king doesn't have any legal moves. So it does have d7, but it's controlled by the queen. And no piece can capture the queen, and no piece can block. I know in this position pieces can block, but to illustrate my point, sort of, if none of these pieces could block the check that the queen is giving, then this would be checkmate. A really quick example of this would be something like this. Okay, so this is actually a form of checkmate. So this is a checkmate because, so firstly, we'll analyze why. So the king, it cannot escape. There's no legal moves. It's blocked in by all its pieces. And the queen is checking the king, the square that the king is currently on. And then no piece can actually capture this queen. There's no piece in black's territory that can actually capture this piece. The king can't capture either, just so you guys know, because the bishop's protecting it, which is why the king can't capture. And then thirdly, no piece can protect or kind of block the check. Well, this is pretty self-explanatory. There's no squares in between the queen and king to prevent checkmate. So this is actually, in fact, a checkmate. I'll demonstrate a different one this time. Yeah, so I'll demonstrate from, yeah, okay. So for example, this is another example of a checkmate. So this is a checkmate because firstly, the king cannot escape. All the legal moves that the king has, they're controlled by the queen. There's no way to capture this queen. No piece in black's camp can capture it. And thirdly, there's no way to protect or block these squares in between the queen and the king. So as you can see, there's actually no piece in black's territory that can actually protect the king or block the check from white. Okay, hopefully, so far, do you guys understand? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. Okay, yep, okay, so I'll show a few examples. Let me stop sharing for a second. So I'll show a few examples of checkmates in one, and I'll have you guys try a few. All right. Okay. So in this position, it's white to move. There's a few more pieces on the board, so it's a bit more complex. But I think this still should be able to, this is still solvable for you guys. So it's white to move, checkmate in one.
Move the bishop to a6.
Yes, that is correct. Bishop to a6 is indeed checkmate, because as you can see, the bishop is checking the king. So that's the first thing. And the king cannot run away because the rook controls the b7 and b8 squares, so the king can't run to the b file. The bishop's also controlling the b7 square, and also the square that they're currently on, which is c8. There's no way to capture this bishop. No piece in black's territory can capture it, and there's no way to block the check or protect the king from this check. So this is indeed checkmate. Okay. This is black to move.
Move the queen to c1.
Yep, that's correct. So queen to c1, king has no legal moves firstly. C2 is taken by the queen. A1 is also covered by the queen. And B1, the square the king is currently on, is also covered by the queen. There's no way to capture the queen. King can't capture because the bishop's defending. And thirdly, the king, there's no way to block the check. No squares between the queen and the king, so there's no theoretically possible way to do that. Okay. Okay, another one, black to move again.
Move queen to the G3.
Okay, so queen to g3 wouldn't actually be checkmate because after queen to g3, then the king can simply take the queen. And also, if white doesn't actually take the queen, the king actually has the f1 square as well, which is why queen to g3 isn't actually checkmate. Any other suggestions?
Queen to f2.
Yep, queen to f2 is correct. So as you can see, the king, so now the king doesn't have the f1 square, and the king can actually take the queen because it's protected by the bishop. G3, G1, H2, and H3 are all covered as well. The rook here covers all the squares on the H file, and G1 and G3 are covered by the queen. There's no way to capture the queen, as I mentioned. King can't run away, and there's no way to block the check. Okay, we'll do two more. Okay, white to move.
Move the rook to d8.
Yep, that is correct. Rook to d8 is indeed checkmate. The pawn controls f7 and h7, so the king can't run to the 7th rank, or the f file, the h file. And the rook patrols the 8th rank, so f8, g8, and h8 are all taken. No way to block the check. King can't run away, and no way to take this rook. So that is checkmate. We'll do another one. White to move.
Move the queen to g7.
Yep, that is correct. Queen takes g7 is indeed checkmate. Firstly, no way to block. Queen is right beside the king. King can't capture this queen because it's protected by the bishop from b2. All the squares are covered that the king can possibly go to. h8 is covered, g8 is also covered, so this is indeed checkmate. Okay, we'll do one, let's see. Okay, so I'll put up one more that's a bit of a challenge. We'll see if you guys can solve it. Let me quickly set it up. Give me one moment. Okay. Okay. So okay, so actually this is a bit more than a checkmate. Yep, so we'll do something like this. Okay. Okay, this, okay. So we'll do one final one, and then afterwards we'll move on to the next thing. White to move here.
Move the bishop to d8.
That is correct. This is indeed checkmate. This square is taken by the bishop. The square that the king is currently on is also taken. The rook controls the d file, so the king can't go to the d file, and that would be checkmate. An additional puzzle, which is looped into here. Say the king went to e8 instead. So on this previous move, white actually gave a double check here, just to show this is actually a real game that was played. So here, white played a double check, attacking the king with the bishop and the rook to illustrate. And so the king here had c7 or e8. Both actually led to checkmate and won. So if the king went to e8, what would be the correct move here?
Rook to d8.
Yep, that is correct. Rook to d8 is checkmate, protected by the bishop. King can't go anywhere. All the legal squares the king can actually go to are taken, and there's no way to block the check. So this would indeed be checkmate. Okay, so the next thing we'll move on to is in chess, continuing on with the different results. There's also a draw possibility in chess. There's a couple of ways a draw can happen. One is a 50 move rule. Basically, that is when in 50 moves, no pawn moves were made or no captures were made. If that happens, then it's a draw because no side has clearly made any progress. And if a position is repeated 3 times, I can demonstrate that. So basically, when a position in a game has happened 3 times, doesn't have to be consecutive, but if it happens 3 times, then a draw, then that game is declared a draw. So an example of this, we can do something like this. Mm, uh, this, um, So okay. I've somewhat forgotten how to make it into a draw, but basically a draw occurs when a position is repeated 3 times, doesn't have to be consecutive. But if a position is repeated 3 times, then it is a draw. Another situation where a draw can happen is if there is insufficient material on the board. So what that means is if there's not enough material for either side to deliver checkmate. So that can happen in a couple of scenarios. One scenario is if there's only 2 kings left on the board. Another scenario if one side has a king and a knight versus a king. Another is if one side has a king and a bishop versus a king. And those 3 scenarios are pretty much the scenarios where it's a complete draw because there's no way to checkmate. And the fourth is kind of technical as well, but if both sides agree to a draw, if both sides think there's no way to make progress. Okay, so those are the pretty much the different results in chess. For a loss, it's basically if you get checkmated or if you give up one or the other, or if you resign, or if you lose on time. Those are the 3 ways to lose. And so those are the different results in chess, as well as how they could happen, as well as the different types of checks when a checkmate happens. And yep, okay, so now we'll split into breakout rooms to do checkmate and 1 practices. So I'll assign you guys to breakout rooms now.
David， 你要进到你的那个 break room 里边去跟 tutor 去练习。David, please go to your break room.